During the winter of 1927 to 28, officials of the federal government made a strange and secret investigation of certain conditions in the ancient Massachusetts seaport of Innsmouth. The public first learned of it in February, when a vast series of raids and arrests occurred, followed by the deliberate burning and dynamiting, under suitable precautions, of an enormous number of crumbling, worm-eaten, and supposedly empty houses along the abandoned waterfront. Uninquiring souls let this occurrence pass as one of the major clashes in a spasmodic war on liquor. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Carr, and welcome back to another episode of the Carr-Quest of H.P. Lovecraft. Now, before we get started, I just want to say I apologize for not getting the next episode to y'all, but it was a bit of a long week last week, and and also Thanksgiving break at CU Denver this week as well. So I've just kind of been on a general break, but now I'm back, and I'm bringing you roughly the first half of our next story, The Shadow Over Innsmouth. Now, we'll get to why the first half. We'll get to that in a little bit, but I just kind of want to give y'all just a little bit. I'm splitting this into two parts, much like Whisperer in Darkness, as to why and what we'll do after this, we'll get to later. So, Shadow Over Innsmouth. This is a story about a unnamed narrator. As far as I know, the narrator is unnamed. And it's basically him learning about the mysterious city of Innsmouth, as you heard in the intro, which, the intro paragraph, Innsmouth is kind of on its way to being sort of isolated and whatnot. But it's basically this guy learning about Innsmouth and ultimately going to Innsmouth for like a day after hearing about it on like a tour of New England he's taking. And I've only read it. I think this is only like this is another novella, so this is kind of in 5 parts. I've only read parts 1 and 2, and a lot of it so far is describing the town of Innsmouth. And it's pretty good. It is very slow though, just from these 2 parts. It's very, very slow. But I feel like once I actually read the rest of it and kind of get a larger idea of what's going on, it'll be pretty good. And already in the first 2 parts, there's a lot to kind of talk about, because if you remember my last episode, which was get this off screen. If you remember my last episode on sorry, it's bugging me. If you remember my last episode on Thing on the Doorstep, I mentioned that story also mentions Innsmouth quite consistently, and I found during research that I think Shadow Over Innsmouth was written before Thing on the Doorstep. I can't remember, but it thus makes Thing on the Doorstep a de facto sequel of sorts, because it not only does it reference it a lot, but some of the main characters are mentioned to have come from Innsmouth. There's references to Gilman House, which is actually referenced in the story after Shadow Over Innsmouth. Well, kinda, sorta, not really, because although the Gilman name is used in this, apparently it doesn't have anything to do with the story that comes after Shadow Over Innsmouth in this collection. That, and already they have mentioned the esoteric Order of Dagon, which is, if you know your H.P. Lovecraft, you know that Dagon, much like Cthulhu, is another sort of underwater deity, elder god, elder, you know, thing, uh, sort of deity, um, and who we'll talk about later, in part two. But as for now, I like this story. I won't go into too much detail. I want to save most of the detail for part two when that comes out. Which, by the way, let's get into that real quick. So again, this is part one. And I'm hoping for tomorrow to kind of do sort of a double feature thing. So like, I'll do part one tonight, and then do part two tomorrow of Shadow Over Innsmouth, and then do the next story after that tomorrow as well. Hopefully, I'm not gonna try and put too much like pressure on myself, but hopefully that'll go down. Is there anything else in the story I wanted to talk about? A lot of it is kind of just describing the town. I think I've mentioned that already. Um, and I guess, and I really want to get into more detail in part two. So I guess in part two I'll go into more sort of discussion about that. Sorry if this seems kind of rushed and scatterbrained or whatnot, but anyway, see you in part two of Shadow Over Innsmouth. I am your host, Andrew Carr. This has been the Carr-Quest of H.P. Lovecraft. And once more, we'll see you in part two of Shadow Over Innsmouth. So until then, see you later.